League of Legends Scouting Report, a guide to gathering and parsing the information available to you. To start with, we will look at the PlayVS website and learn what information is found there. Then we will look at a spreadsheet that has the information in a much more condensed format. The spreadsheet will also include information gathered from other sources such as op.gg, u.gg, or the League of Legends client. Please note that I'm using actual screenshots from actual teams. The standings page is the easiest place to do your scouting report from if you are doing multiple weeks worth of scouting at a time. Even if you aren't doing a full scouting report on a team, it helps to occasionally go through the rankings and check just to see how each team is winning, seeing which teams beat each other, whether they're winning by forfeit or whether they're winning by actually beating the opposing teams. Check to see if they're close games or blowouts. When a new schedule block comes out, I like to go ahead and do research on all three teams that we will face. Each week I will go in and update the scouting report as new results come in. When you click on a team, you can see their recent games. It generally only shows 3 games, but you can expand it to show all of their games for a season. In this image, I have expanded a team's recent play history. On this screen, you can see at a glance quite a few important stats for a team. You can quickly identify common picks and bans. You can generally identify how long a game lasted based on CS numbers and gold earned. The KDA will tell you how one-sided the game was in general. So I clicked on a game and opened up to the Game 1 Team Stats page. This page contains a wealth of information for us to use in scouting. We see each team's picks and bans, but just as importantly, we see KDA numbers, Barons, Dragons, Inhibs, and Towers. The objective numbers can be used to give us a good sense of the game that the KDA numbers don't always reveal. At a glance, the left side team here was the stronger team. Look at the eliminations, respawns, and assists, and look at the Dragon and Tower numbers. We will dive into these numbers more with the spreadsheet. The top performers are listed just below the overall stats for the game. This gives you a glance at who you might want to focus your attention on when you're doing your research. Below this is the roster for the team. This shows you who was supposed to play each role. This is important to note because sometimes players enter the lobby in the wrong order, and you just have to play a guessing game to figure out who played in which lane. Sometimes people swap roles in Champ Select as well. Just be aware that some detective work might be needed at times to figure out who played what lane. Next, swap to the tab to look at the player stats rather than the team stats. As we look on this page, we see which players got the eliminations, which got the assists, and which died the most. We can see which of the players contributed most to the vision, who dropped the most wards. We see the overall damage, and who earned the most CS. This information shows us who the team leaders are in many ways. I'll place all this information into a spreadsheet so that it is available in one place. This is the spreadsheet that I use when scouting. It contains a wealth of information, most of it gotten from the PlayVS website. I track all of the starters for the team and also all the subs that play in official games. This does get confusing at times when teams are constantly swapping players between teams, but I've figured out how to make it work. I track information on both the team that I'm researching as well as the opponent on this spreadsheet. It is important to know something about the opponent for each week's matchup because that can help explain some of the numbers that you see from game to game, week to week. Here we have a close-up of the bans and objective information. I have a spot for some general information about the matchup between the teams as well. The team we are looking at is currently 8-2 for the regular season. They were 4-0 during the preseason. We are looking at the preseason and the matches for the first 3 weeks of the regular season. As I look at this, I will compare the bans versus the players' typical champion pools. I will try to figure out how the bans impacted champion select. I'm not doing a full scouting report on the opponent, but I can generally use the bans to see if the team was banning against meta champs, champs that were good versus the picks that they made, or if I think they were banning versus a specific player or two. The preseason matches aren't much help since they were blind pick, and there are no bans for blind pick. We'll also pay attention to the overall trends for Dragons, Towers, Barons, and Inhibs. In this case, I see that the team lost the games which they didn't take the majority of Dragons. This would imply that the bot lane or mid lane matchup was getting pushed by ganks, by skill differential, or simply due to the champion matchup. I will look at the overall KDA of the team. When this team wins, they tend to have quite a few more assists than the opponents. I will look at the number of kills versus assists. For instance, in the first preseason matchup, the team got 103 assists in the first game and 80 assists in the second game. This would indicate that they were grouping up for team fights quite often. Not all of the matchups follow the same pattern, but in the games that they lose, the number of assists is very low. The team seems to be solid at grouping up and team fighting, especially in matchups that are not completely one-sided. In this section of the spreadsheet, right below the ban and objective sections, we see the top, jungle, and mid laners. At the far left, I have researched information on the players based on their summoner name. I also always like to include the player's real name. In the spring of 2019, some players changed their summoner names part of the way through the season, or they changed which accounts they played with. I started keeping track of the real names to help keep up with this. It has proven useful this year since some players are using different accounts from last year. One player I've researched is using a level 16 account that has no ranked games, but last year he was ranked Plat 3 on a different account. I was able to pull up my research from last year and look him up using last year's information. That knowledge can make a huge difference if we actually play that team. I've looked up each player's rank, their account level, and generally will include the mastery level of the players. Sorry, I forgot to fill it out on this team. I generally use op.gg, u.gg, and the Riot client to help find out this information. I look at the most played champions in solo queue that a player tends to play. If they're playing a champion ranked, they are probably comfortable on that champion. I'll look to see if the player plays mostly ranked, unranked, blind draft, or bots. I can also use this information based on the results from games to determine if the account is a primary account, a Smurf account, or simply a school account. The student using a level 16 account that I mentioned earlier wasn't using an account named after the school, and so I considered that to be a Smurf account. It's obviously not their main account. I like to look at these lanes together, since the top and the mid often only get help from the jungle, and the bot lane plays as a team as well. For each game, I've made a note of each player and their KDA. I note their opponent's champions and rank as well. Seeing the opponent's rank can help identify why a player got the results that he did. In this case, I'm looking at top and see a player who doesn't normally play the champions in solo queue that they're playing in the matchups. This player might prefer to play another lane or simply another playstyle while playing in solo queue. In this case, he is simply playing the tank for the team in every game. It looks like he is generally not an aggressive player as a tank, probably because he is not used to the matchups. It is good to notice that the player did not play for 2 matchups as well. I'm looking at the jungle, who plays a variety of champs and is picking the champs that he plays in solo queue. He tends to work better with the starting roster, probably because the subs for the team are not as good as the starters, and he doesn't have to focus his attention as much on specific lanes all of the time. He's a bronze player, but he held his own against a silver 1 jungler. This means that his rank could probably go up, but simply doesn't because he doesn't play that much ranked. When looking at the mid lane, he's obviously a skilled player, being Diamond 4 in Season 9. He plays lots of champs and has lots of games played on those champs. He has a high account level at level 245. He shows a preference for high burst damage champions, although he doesn't seem to have a preference for caster versus melee champions. He's also played jungle for 1 matchup this season. Since I have the stats for last season, this player played jungle last season for the team for part of that season. He had solid performance in the jungle as well, especially on Master Yi. If this player has a good game, this team seems to win. He doesn't seem to carry the team most of the time though, except for matchups where there's a massive skill disparity. Likely, this is due to getting quite a bit of jungle attention from the opponent because of his rank. Now we're looking at the bot lane duo. These are skilled players, with the ADC being the more skilled of the 2. In most of the games that they win, he seems to carry, like an ADC should. Just as importantly, the sup tends to get a lot of assists in the games that they win. If the sup is dying and not getting assists, they tend to lose. The sup did play ADC 1 game, and clearly didn't do as well as the main ADC. If this duo has a good game, this team wins. In every game that this team lost, the support was dying more than the opposing support. It is interesting to note that support plays support in solo queue, but the ADC tends to play mid lane solo queue. Now I'm looking at the team as a whole. I'm looking at the overall team composition now. Top lane always plays a tank. The jungler tends to play an aggressive jungler. The mid lane tends to pick a high burst damage champion. The ADC has 4 different picks, each does lots of damage, though they generally lack in mobility. The support likes both caster supports and tank supports, and plays both well. If I showed more, I would notice that the sup likes to play Nautilus, and I would suggest banning Nautilus when playing against him, unless you happen to play a champion that counters Nautilus, or you feel strong against a Nautilus. If I were to do this, I would probably focus my bans against the weaker members of the team since their champion pool is more restricted. Probably wouldn't ban versus top since we notice that he doesn't seem to be used to tanks and always seems to play one. Another way to ban against this team would be to focus my bans on banning out champions that counter the strat that my team wants to play. This team has a fairly sizable champion pool, especially the mid lane and ADC. You can't really ban them out, so focus bans on counter picks to your planned draft. I hope this guide has been helpful to you in showing you what information is available and how to interpret it. Hopefully it will be useful when deciding pick ban strategies in the future.